I just got done talking about how Penn State still needed help at wide receiver, and then they go out and get a high upside wide receiver.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Keith Jones Jr., that is who Penn State lands out of the transfer portal. You are locked on to Penn State football, and thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions a part of your day. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcasting network out there. Later on in the show, we're going to talk about former five-star tight end Andrew Olesh, who was a member of Penn State, has now committed to the Oregon Ducks. I joined Locked On Ducks with Spencer McLaughlin to discuss the impact of that move. Penn State retains a promising linebacker, to say the least, in Cam Smith. What that means for the linebacker depth chart. How soon can we expect him to contribute? We'll get to that on the other side of this segment. We got to begin with Keith Jones Jr. and the state of the wide receiver room, because I just got done with an episode with Brian Smith talking about how, hey, this is a need. This is a question mark going into 2026 and honestly beyond, but you get an answer. You get an answer. And in short, this guy checks a lot of boxes with what Penn State wants to do at wide receiver. And he's somebody that I think can contribute right away in 2026. He comes over from Grambling State. So the immediate concern is going to be, well, he didn't face Big Ten cornerbacks. Actually, he did against Ohio State, but that performance was, fairly lackluster across the board. Grambling State was shut out. They are a member of FCS, so the competition level. Is Keith Jones going to be able to handle that at the Big Ten level? And that is still to be determined. But with what Penn State has available, they really don't have a lot of X wide receivers right now that I think will be able to contribute in 2026. The future, I'm optimistic for it, right? They add somebody like Karan Brookins, who comes over from Iowa State, but I still think his best football is ahead. Keith Jones Jr. is entering year 3. He redshirted at Grambling State. He was the leading receiver this past season as a redshirt freshman, and then he'll be entering his redshirt sophomore season. There is a need for him to contribute in 2026. He will back up Chase Sowell, because in the previous podcast, I hope that you watched it. It's still relevant with or without Jones Jr., because Penn State, yes, they get somebody else who helps them on the depth chart, somebody that can contribute in 2026. But I would still like to see some more wide receiver additions, if I'm being honest. So Jones Jr. will be that backup at the X, because Penn State's looking for these tall, super athletic X boundary wide receivers. Koby Howard and Brett Eskildsen will rotate frequently at the Z wide receiver, somebody that's just to the open side of the field. They can make plays in space. They're the better route runners. You want your X wide receiver to be able to beat man coverage, to beat press man coverage, and make those spectacular catches in tight windows. Rocco Becht is not afraid to get the football to you, even if you're in blanket coverage. He will trust you if you give him a reason to. So Chase Sowell does that really well. Keith Jones Jr., he showed it. He showed it at Grambling State. And what's interesting about Grambling State, so Jones Jr. this past season had close to 35 catches, over 500 yards, 5 touchdowns. Okay, well, that stat line's not that great, or it's good, but it could be better. Grambling State is a run-heavy offense. So what is Jones Jr. bringing to the Nittany Lions? You're getting height. You're getting big playmaking ability, truly. I like that Jones Jr. can succeed in all levels of the football field. And when I say that, I mean he can make plays in short routes, intermediate routes, and long routes. So he's not just a deep threat downfield and you throw a jump ball to him. He gives you a red zone threat, and he gives you someone you give him the ball on a screenplay. It's that versatility. So you can throw the jump ball to him in the corner of the end zone, or 40, 50 yards downfield. Or you can throw a 5-yard quick screen and he'll take the ball 25 plus yards and make a play that way. I was really impressed with his speed. One of the things that I would like to see from Jones Jr. is to continue to build out his frame. So he was listed at Grambling State at 6'4", 185 pounds. Allegedly, according to other reports, he actually weighed in over 200, pushing up to 210. That is a positive sign because Big Ten, he's not going to win a lot of press man coverage battles if he's 200 pounds, if that's where he's hovering. You would like to see him get to 220, right? But not to a point where it limits his athleticism, because again, I do like that he has that speed component to him. He moves extremely well for someone who is 6'4", but you also want him to add that size so he doesn't get bullied around by larger cornerbacks who, I know Penn State doesn't play them in the immediate future, but Ohio State, maybe right in the postseason, Big Ten championship, college football playoff, Ohio State is going to have those cornerbacks to counter players like Sowell and Keith Jones Jr. Oregon, right? Michigan, okay? Most of the Big Ten will have a player to be able to counter that. You want him to continue to add size, to add muscle there. And coming from a run-heavy offense, Jones Jr. is going to be able, he's going to know how to block. And that is going to be a major component in making sure that you get a ton of snaps and playing time. So as we sit here right now in the middle of January, I'm putting out some depth chart projections just to try to get an idea for myself what this Penn State offense and defense are going to look like for the upcoming season. And I see Jones Jr. being an instant contributor. How much he contributes is definitely to be determined. But I look at the two deep depth chart at the X and at the Z positions. I see Chase Sowell being the starter, Jones Jr. backing him up. There's your 1-2 at the X spot. At the Z, I think Eskildsen and Howard will be co-starters. Howard's just too good to be a second string player. But you also can't. Eskildsen proved that he can be a leading wide receiver in an offense. But they'll rotate because they're good at different things, but they're both too talented to say, this guy's on the bench, this is your clear starter. They'll be co-starters. And with that being said, Penn State still needs wide receiver help. Look, I like that they were able to retain a guy like Peter Gonzalez, still to be determined, unless I'm mistaken, about Lyric Samuel. There's another guy that, hey, if he adds weight, he can be somebody long-term that could do very well at that X wide receiver spot. Penn State will run some, not a lot, some 3 wide receiver sets. You'd probably move Koby Howard or Eskildsen into the slot, rotate them in again. Eskildsen is fast as anything. I mean, that is a speedy wide receiver. So he will, you want to be able to utilize that in this offense. But remember, Penn State is going to be focused on running the football effectively, ground and pound, controlling time of possession, utilizing the tight ends in the passing game. It is not the end all be all if Penn State elects to run 2 wide receiver sets. Still, you have an injury to Chase Sowell. Okay, now you're down to Jones Jr., who hasn't played Big Ten football enough. Koby Howard, Eskildsen, they are too valuable to lose. It's kind of like the defensive end spot, the edge defender, where you still need capable players. And right now I see 4 guys that I would rely on at the wide receiver spot. There are players that could emerge, but is that what you want to bank on? Do you want to bank on a true freshman or a redshirt freshman that still has a ton of eligibility left stepping forward? Noah Polley is going to know better than I do as I sit here, but from the outside view looking in, I see 4 names that are key contributors. Everybody else is to be determined, or their best football is down the road. It's in the future. So I would hope that Penn State is able to add another playmaker just so you have some more depth. If you do get in a situation where you got to play from behind and pass the ball a little more, you are going to need to run 3 wide receiver sets. Okay. It's just the nature of football. Demarion Witten is a player to know. He's visited Penn State. Noah Rogers, if I haven't missed his commitment somewhere else, he's somebody that visited Penn State. Still unlikely. We see that Quincy Porter has committed to Notre Dame. Former Ohio State wide receiver Mylan Graham was visiting Notre Dame, and I think he received a projection from On3 and 24/7 to land there as well. Penn State still needs wide receiver help, but mostly guys who are at least going to be contributors. They don't need to be superstars necessarily, but I would like to see some more contributors that could give you 2 years of eligibility as well. Penn State at the linebacker spot, though, is going to have an intriguing setup, in my opinion. And they're able to retain Cam Smith, who could certainly factor into that equation this upcoming season, but definitely long-term And could he even be a star? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is giving all customers even more ways to get in on the action every single game day of the playoffs. Because right now, every college football playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost waiting for them in the app. Here's what you're going to love about it. You get to use the profit boost on bets that you already feel good about. You can ride with the favorite when you think that team controls the matchup. You can take a shot on the underdog if you feel like an upset's coming, or build a parlay around the players and moments that you think will decide the game. Then you apply the profit boost and go after even bigger winnings. And when you win, FanDuel pays out instantly, which is perfect for playoff football because there's no waiting around. FanDuel is the best place to get into the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app to get your college football playoff profit boosts every game day. That's FanDuel. And still to come on this episode, I joined Spencer McLaughlin over on Locked On Ducks to talk about the impact of Andrew Olesh, what Penn State's losing, what Oregon is gaining with that transfer portal commitment. But let's talk about who Penn State is retaining, and that's linebacker Cam Smith. And of course, I'm going to like this move. This is a former four-star linebacker, a top 10 prospect out of the state of Pennsylvania, according to 24/7. He went to St. Joe's Prep, so in Pennsylvania, but he's actually from New Jersey, right? He's listed as a top 10 player out of Pennsylvania once upon a time in the 2025 cycle. So I'm eager to see how his development will continue to go with the Nittany Lions. They retain Dan Connor. Okay, that was probably a huge reason why Cam Smith decided to stay around. That's somebody that you originally committed to. He's going to be staying on staff. So there's that familiarity, right? I think it's fair to also bring in LeVar Arrington the second into this conversation as well, since we haven't actually seen an official commitment, but he's still listed on the 2026 roster that's on Go PSU Sports. It's all intriguing. Let me focus on Cam Smith for the moment, though, as I like Smith's upside a ton. Star player is, well, I think he's on the right track, and I'll explain why. Smith was underutilized his freshman year, and that's, of course, going to be understandable because Jim Knowles' complicated defensive system, too complex, too complicated for its own good, as we all saw. But even when Penn State started to get thin at linebacker, and frankly, it was just the Tony Rojas injury. That's why Penn State got thin at linebacker. They lost one player, and they became extremely thin. They did turn to Cam Smith strategically at times. And I know that Alex Tatch got more of the run as a true freshman, but Cam Smith was in there from time to time. I think that is very telling for someone that was able to pick up a defensive playbook like Jim Knowles is when Smith did not enroll early. He came in May, June, joined the team later, and was not an early enrollee freshman, and was still able to see the football field this past season in Jim Knowles' defense, right? So that tells me that he is a fast learner. Yes, there was a need for him to play to an extent, but it is impressive that they were saying, okay, we're going to trust a true freshman. He received a lot of praise throughout the season. So all the signs point positively to Cam Smith being a good linebacker long-term for Penn State. What his role will be in 2026, I think is fair to be determined, but he's certainly going to be someone that I think factors into at least an opportunity for playing time. So he's going to have to fight for it, right? That's the whole point of this. That's what we're talking about across the board, is that everybody is there to fight for a spot and for this to be an overall competition. And I easily see that for Cam Smith to compete at the will linebacker spot because he's still undersized compared, and Penn State's going to run more 3 linebacker sets. So I imagine that Danton Lynn will have, 4-2-5 because you have so much talent in the secondary. You have to run 5 defensive backs. What do you do in the front 7? That's going to be the key to Lynn's defense. You have so many defensive tackles, not enough edge defenders at this point, and a decent amount of linebackers. Tony Rojas, when he's back from injury, he's your starting will. Who's going to be your starting Mike? Your starting Sam? Well, that's what the Iowa State linebackers are for. So they bring over Cooper Ebel. They bring over Caleb Bacon, Kale Brazina. All those guys are going to mostly factor in at the Mike and the Sam linebacker spots. Alex Tatch, I think if he continues, but he also dealt with an injury at the end of the season here. And I wonder what his outlook is as far as availability and development, because he was just a true freshman himself and he didn't use his red shirt. So you hope that you have Tatch back for a majority of this upcoming season. Again, that's to be determined. We don't know the extent of that injury, but not ideal timing towards the end going into spring football for Tatch's sake. That opens up opportunities again for Cam Smith to continue to push. I think the only certainty that you really have at this point is Tony Rojas, and he's, again, coming off of an injury, but you know the talent, you know the ability of Rojas. Cooper Ebel, Kale Brazina, Caleb Bacon are all guys that they are able to stop the run. They are physical. They obviously look at their stature. They're coming in at 6'4", 240, 245 pounds for the most part. These are going to be guys that are reliable on first and second down, but you're still going to need 3 down linebackers, especially, or just somebody that can come in on third down, obvious passing situations. And that's where I see Cam Smith being able to help out in the short term. He's a smart, cerebral player. He's going into his second year. He's got 4 years of eligibility. He gets to work with Dan Connor again for the foreseeable future. And then you also have LeVar Arrington II again. I just want to see him make an official announcement. I don't want to assume anything at this point because, okay, look at Dejan Lane, look at Tyseer Denmark. I know different circumstances because they recommitted and then they decommitted and entered the portal. We haven't really heard or seen anything from Arrington II. One thing we do know that is certain, Cam Smith is back. That is a move that Penn State would want, which is why they tried to retain him. He's going to be someone that I believe contributes in 2026 long term. Especially, okay, is Tony Rojas going to leave after the 26th season? Does he, if he plays a full season, if he's fully healthy, does that mean he's going to go into the NFL draft, right? And Ebel, Brazina, Bacon, Brazina has multiple years of eligibility, but there is going to be a somewhat of a linebacker room reset across the board after the 2026 season with what you're projected to lose at linebacker, which means that I think Cam Smith can absolutely be a starter going forward and being one of the faces of the defense if he continues this developmental track. So I have optimistic aspirations for Cam Smith. Good to see that Penn State was able to retain him. And again, I just want to see the confirmation from LeVar Arrington II because with this hybrid defense, I could see him having a unique role that really brings the number 11 jersey and justifies him wearing that, because Danton's defense is going to be very unique as far as how they're going to be able to set players up for success. So that's exciting to see, honestly, for the 2026 season. All right, let's talk about a player that's now in the past. Andrew Olesh. He was a 5-star tight end, one of the highest ceilings, honestly, out of anybody in that class of 2025. He's now over at Oregon. What is Penn State losing? Quite a bit, because I still see star potential with Andrew Olesh. That is coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. This episode is also brought to you by Wayfair. The new year is here, and it's the perfect time to reset your routine and refresh your space. If you're spending more time at home, you might as well love how it looks and how it feels. That's why you should turn to Wayfair. It's your one-stop shop for getting your home back on track. From bedding and mattresses to storage solutions for every room, Wayfair makes it easy to start the year fresh. Wayfair has everything you need for a full home refresh, and it's all in one place. So whether you're updating your living room, organizing your space, or upgrading your work from home setup, Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find exactly what works for your style and your budget. You can pick up new bedding, accent pillows from Wayfair, and it will completely change how your bedroom feels. Cleaner, calmer, more put together. You will love that you can find pieces that will match your style without spending a fortune. Shopping is easy, delivery is smooth, and everything arrives exactly as expected. And honestly made getting back into a routine this year it will honestly make getting back into a routine this year feel a lot more manageable. So get organized, get refreshed, and get back on track this year for way less with Wayfair. Head over to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That is WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home.
Well, there is one transfer addition. Maybe there will be more by the time you listen to or watch this show, because apparently it all changes every single second. Zach Seyko of Locked On Nittany Lions. Hey, Seyko. Hey.
You're catching on. I know that all too well.
Yeah, you really do. For my everydayers out there, we all remember Seyko from our illustrious crossovers all last year in one of the games of the year in college football, and then Oregon sent Penn State into a spiral. Anyway, it's all worked out. Matt Campbell's a really good coach.
That's okay. Yeah, so, I don't know how much I mind at this point.
Yeah, good. I think folks are glad to hear that. And talk to us about Andrew Olesh. Big time recruit, didn't play this year. Give us the rundown.
So I guess Oregon even double benefits, right? Because you get a former 5-star tight end from Penn State. So Olish did not play at all. He has a ton of talent in the world. I would say that he fits into the category of a jumbo wide receiver. I've compared him to Mike Gesicki. I think that's fair. It's just somebody that's a much better receiver, much higher ceiling in the passing game. If you're asking him now, I'm not saying that he could never develop as the complete tight end, but I think he's further away from the George Kittle profile, if you will. And I hope that he gets well soon, right? We're recording this after the 49ers Eagles game, but that's who you want your tight ends to be. Somebody that can lay a block, that is physical. They're a 3-down player. They're in any situation kind of player. I do wonder if Olish is that, because he was hidden on the depth chart. And I don't even know if he would have played a lot for Penn State going into next season. Penn State made him a priority in his recruitment for a reason. They were able to, now, of course, there's always chatter. Penn State spent a ton of money in NIL to get him because he was projected to Michigan for the longest time, but they were able to get him at the tail end of that recruitment. So they did prioritize him in some manner, whatever that was, because they thought he could be the answer in a couple more years, or the guy maybe even next year. But he is somebody that I think can play right away for Oregon, or at least split reps. I do see if you put him in the right role.
So why didn't he play this year?
Redshirt season, Penn State was fairly loaded with its tight end depth chart, even though it wasn't really star-studded. There were veteran guy coming back from injury, and Andrew Olesh, who Penn State's going to build around with the other tight ends that they got from Iowa State. So they lose Khalil Dinkins to the NFL. They lose Luke Reynolds to the transfer portal to Virginia Tech. Andrew Olesh probably looked around and said, there's a lot of tight ends, and I'm much better utilized as a wide receiver. Okay, that's just it. There are different types of tight ends. Okay, Andrew Olesh can be really good. It was just very crowded, and it was an uphill battle. I don't have the full scale to that, other than he was a true freshman, crowded tight end depth chart. Probably maybe needed to add a little more weight as well. I don't really want guys that. It's kind of the same thing with defensive linemen and linebackers. And I agree with James Franklin on one thing. He said that tight end is one of the most difficult positions to develop at in college, because you are going from being you can get away with being 210, 220 in high school, but then you're going to seal the edge against a 250, 260-pound defensive end. Like, you go from blocking guys that are around your weight to deny Dennis Sutton or Tatum Tuioti at any point in a year's time, right? And that's a difficult ask. That's a difficult ask.
So he's 6'4.5", 215 pounds is what he was coming out of high school.
He needed to add the weight. Yeah.
Right. And reminds me a little bit of another tight end Oregon has in the room, Roger Saliapaga, who was tight end 3 for the Ducks this season. Now, again, as we do this segment, we don't know what Kenyon Sadiq's NFL draft decision is, and it makes me think that he's probably going to the league. I've always felt like Sadiq was going to the NFL because he's going to be the first tight end taken off the board. You talked about the athleticism. Sadiq played wide receiver in high school as well. In any way does Olish remind you of Kenyon Sadiq, who transformed his body over the course of a couple of years and became an elite NFL draft prospect?
There very, very few times do we see tight ends that are just college ready. Again, because you are asked to, even though Andrew Olesh wasn't the blocker, game day ready blocker that I guess he needed to be, right? Tyler Warren took 5 years to develop before he became a superstar. Olish could be fast tracked in that instance. Again, if you ask him to do things that he's really good at, he's an incredible athlete above all else. He played free safety for his high school. He could do. So imagine him as a 6'4", 215, 220-pound free safety, kind of sitting back there, ball hawking quarterbacks. Okay, so he understands both sides of the football, which I really liked. Again, he was a former 5-star. How could you not like 5-star prospects one way or another? I know that Oregon was fairly involved in his recruitment. Again, Penn State made him a serious priority. I wish they did this with Brandon Finney, because we saw how Brandon Finney paid out. So James Franklin and the staff,
pretty good.
He's
pretty good.
They said, hey, Finney, okay, we have Oregon swooping in this recruitment. We're not going to try to take this. I imagine they did, but they had no issues convincing Olesh. Why wasn't that same attention given to Finney? So again, the upside is there. Penn State did that for a reason at the time under James Franklin. He's not going to be a superstar tomorrow, but hey, down the road, again, just the same development track for Kenyon Sadiq or anybody else. Tight ends aren't built over the course of 1 or 2 seasons. They do take time to develop.
So is the weight the only reason that you know of that he didn't play in his true freshman campaign? Because, Sadiq is, I think, 240-ish. And
that's significant.
Yeah.
That's 25 pounds.
Yeah, he bulked up to that this year in his 3rd season and still was able to maintain his elite speed and athleticism. And there are plenty of Oregon fans, and it's not totally unfounded, who will tell you he was underutilized this year. There were times when he was, and he only became the focal point of the offense when a bunch of other receivers got hurt, and then the passing game was still really good. And Oregon fans were kind of sitting there going, well, wait a minute, why weren't you just throwing him the ball a bunch? But again, that's a different conversation that requires a lot more nuance than what I just gave to it. Do you think that's what his ceiling is? If he is able to maintain his speed and athleticism, and he puts on some weight so that he can take on those blocks, because you can't overlook what Sadiq did as a blocker in his time with the Ducks, or a lot of tight ends, frankly. It's not something that is an afterthought. It's something that I think statistically you actually do more normally if you're a typical tight end than running routes. Is there any concern in your mind that there might be some limitation on that front because he's undergoing this kind of physical change, or do you think that he'll be able to make a pretty seamless transition?
I mean, when you're at 6'4", 6'5", right? It's very easy to. All right, let me be careful. It is more favorable for you to add weight, okay? Because your body can handle it, okay? It's just how quickly does his body develop? So get him to 240 and you're good, okay? You just don't want him getting tossed around by defensive ends. That's all. Until he can, because he's not going to be you don't need him to be a 6th offensive lineman. You want him to be a guy that can seal the edge, handle a double team, climb to the 2nd level, chip a linebacker, just be self-reliant on run plays, not be a liability, as opposed to, well, he's only a receiver, right? That's the idea here. As far as receiving capability, look, we didn't really see him on game days. In practices, he would make one-handed catches in these 10, 15-minute windows, right? When they're not doing, it's just kind of they're going around tackling dummies, right? They're focusing on footwork. But Olish shows the natural ability of a big-time playmaker. I would still want him at Penn State, okay? This isn't he's damaged goods for Oregon and, take care of him as best as you can. You're good luck at getting anything out of him. No, I fully still expect him to be someone who can achieve star status. He's only played 1 year of college football. He's got 4 years of eligibility.
But he's never taken the field, right? You say played. He's been in a college football program for 1 year. He hasn't played yet. So there could still be some development to be done on that front, because he's got to take his first snap on the field, right?
He's got 4 years of eligibility.
Yeah.
If you're looking for an instant impact player, I don't think that's the case right now. If you're looking for somebody next season and you want to take that long-term bet, Oregon Dan Lanning might strike gold here.